It is morning at Lapis Lazuli Academy when Tiara Rose is suddenly approached by her friends, who are already crying about tomorrow's graduation because they're terrified their favorite top-tier lady is going to ghost them. But with that main character energy, Tiara reassures them she's staying in the kingdom to fulfill her destiny as the future queen, sending the girls into a hype mode frenzy as they demand to know the wedding date for her and Prince Heartknights. Prompting Tiara to explain her post-grad grind involves a year of bridal training before the final cathedral wedding event, vowing to carry the kingdom on her back and live up to every NPC's expectations. But when she enters the classroom and spots Heartknights, the vibe check immediately fails, because the prince looks like he's in a permanent rage mode, making her wonder if his character script just hit a major bug, until a girl named Akari suddenly speedruns into the room and yeets herself straight into his arms, causing the prince's edgy expression to instantly soften into total simp mode, while Akari hits Tiara with a wicked smirk that says, "I'm the heroine now," sending Tiara into a total system freeze as a flood of forbidden lore crashes into her brain, unlocking the realization that she's actually a gamer from modern-day Japan, who spent her previous life clearing this exact Otome game using Akari as her player character. And the shock of being ice-guyed into the world's most hated villainess is a total critical hit, shutting down her consciousness on the spot, which is a major problem because she just realized she's the final boss, not the protagonist, waking up later in the clinic only to find Heartknights camping by her bed with zero empathy, as he coldly informs her that her carriage is waiting to deport her back to the manor, shattering her memories of the kind Prince Root because the real Heartknights has been seriously nerfed, accusing her of faking a faint just to grief his relationship with Akari, and straight up uninviting her from the graduation escort quest even though they're still technically engaged, leaving Tiara to turn pale as she calculates the incoming social humiliation, knowing exactly how this script ends because she's played through this condemnation event 100 times, remembering the game's premise where Akari used her holy prayer magic to bypass the class system and rizz up the prince, leading to the inevitable graduation ball where the villainess gets publicly obliterated. And as she fast travels back to her family home, Tiara feels physically sick knowing she's destined for a bad ending, since her character's role is to get dragged away while her engagement is deleted in front of the whole server, even though she hasn't actually done anything toxic since her memories rebooted. But the reputation of a villainess is hard to overwrite, leaving her with zero allies in this world, until she reaches the manor and finds her parents waiting with premium loot and sweets, dropping legendary accessories for her wedding quest like they aren't aware her route is currently failing, making Tiara force a smile because her father's strict training was only meant to turn her into a high-tier queen, a role she spent her whole life grinding for, even if she had to scold Heartknights for his low-level behavior, which the prince unfortunately misinterpreted as a cruelty stat rather than duty. And though she considers skipping the ball to avoid the cutscene, she knows a dignified lady never ducks a fight, so she decides to face the music for her family's sake, while elsewhere a mysterious guy named Aquasteed is activating his own magic to force a different ending for her story, right as the day of the party arrives and Tiara's friends are busy flaming Akari's disrespectful behavior, vowing to stay in her party even if the prince decides to jump ship. But once she's alone, Tiara's resolve starts to lag, making her maid Fellini bring out a table of high-tier biscuits to buff her mood, letting her childhood love for baking carry over into this life and restore her HP just as Akari bursts in to fake some concern for the villainess she's about to replace, rocking a legendary gown and jewelry that screams, "I have the heroine's plot armor," followed by Heartknights, who treats Tiara like a total NPC before they both dip for the main hall, leaving Tiara to stand before the grand doors knowing the condemnation event is finally starting. And as she enters the room solo, the entire guest list gasps at her lack of an escort, giving Heartknights the perfect opening to announce he's officially breaking his engagement and deleting her from his life, while her father tries to protest the illegal move until Tiara signals him to hold his aggro, forcing herself to stay composed while she demands a valid reason for this public humiliation, only for the prince to scoff and accuse her of being toxic toward the innocent country girl heroine. But Tiara shuts him down by pointing out she was only enforcing the server's laws and customs, reminding the prince that his dancing more than twice with Akari move was a total rule break, which only makes Heartknights rage harder as he doubles down on his accusations, forcing Tiara to realize that in a scripted Otome world, The villainess can't win an argument with logic. Finally, it's the day of the graduation party, and things are about to get wild. Declaring that Tiara is officially banished from the kingdom, a punishment way harsher than the original game's script, threatening to delete her from her family and friends forever as despair finally starts to swallow her whole. Until Aquastede, the crown prince of the sequel game, steps out of the crowd to call out the prince's toxic behavior, approaching Tiara with austere confidence and telling her to stand tall because she's the one in the right, leaving her stunned because she recognizes him as the legendary Heartthrob from the game she never got to play. And as he roasts Heart Knights for humiliating a lady at a celebratory event, he turns to Tiara, kneels on the spot, and launches a surprise proposal that leaves the entire room completely muted, kissing her hand while Akari starts fuming in the background because she's no longer the center of attention. Fellini sees her stress levels rising, so she wheels in a legendary spread of sweets to buff her mood. Tiara's eyes light up the second she sees the loot. One bite of a biscuit and her HP is basically back to full. She remembers how much she loved baking in her past life, and she's glad her hobby carried over after she got ice-guyed. Fellini admits she just wanted to see her smile before the main event kicks off. Right then, Akari rushes in to check on her, and the two exchange some polite but tense greetings. Tiara notices that Akari looks exactly like a high-tier heroine, dripped out in a gown that screams, "I have major plot armor." Akari talks about how worried she and the prince were when Tiara collapsed yesterday. Speak of the devil, Prince Heart Knights himself enters the room. Tiara stays polite while he explains that Akari was losing sleep over her health. He asks if she's still planning to show up for the party tonight. She confirms she's going, despite still needing a little more time to prep her final look. The prince and Akari head out, leaving Tiara to finish getting ready for the storm that's coming. A short while later, Tiara stands before the massive doors of the party hall. She knows the second she enters, the infamous condemnation event is officially live. The guards throw the doors open and announce her arrival. The guests start whispering when they see her solo, while Heart Knights stands with Akari, ready to start the drama. Heart Knights doesn't waste any time, announcing to the whole room that he's officially breaking off his engagement with Tiara. Her Knight Shah is ready to throw hands, but Tiara gives him the signal to stand down and let it play out. Keeping her cool, Tiara asks for a valid reason, pointing out that humiliating her in public like this is a major red flag. He scoffs, acting like she should already know exactly what she did wrong. She looks him dead in the eye and tells him if he wanted a new girl, he should have followed the legal procedure instead of this mid-tier drama. Heart Knights tries to play the hero, accusing her of bullying Akari just because she's from the countryside. Tiara stands her ground, explaining she was only strict because Akari didn't know the first thing about the kingdom's laws. She was literally just doing her job as the future queen. But the prince isn't buying any of it. He accuses her of making Akari kneel to him and stopping them from vibing together at past parties. Without missing a beat, Tiara reminds him that kneeling to a prince is literally the standard NPC protocol. As for the dancing, she stepped in because Akari was over her limit for a single night. That's a privilege only for the fiancé, which at the time was still Tiara. She basically tells him to learn his own kingdom's rules before talking smack. This only makes the dense prince angrier as he continues to hurl accusations. Tiara realizes that even with facts and logic, the plot is rigged against her and she's destined to catch this L. So she stops the debate and calmly agrees to end the engagement since he's clearly already simping for Akari. Heart Knights officially declares the breakup and announces Akari as the new future queen of the server. Tiara tries to keep her head up, telling herself she still has her family and her real ones by her side. But then the prince drops the ultimate bombshell. He declares she's being banished for harming the new heroine. Tiara is completely frozen. This is way worse than the ending she saw in her past life game. Banishment means she loses her family, her friends, and her entire life. She was ready to lose the guy, but she didn't expect to lose her entire world too. Just as despair is about to kick in, Aquastede steps forward like an absolute unit, telling the prince he's going way too far. He walks right up to her and asks if she's okay with the most based energy ever. Tiara is shocked. She instantly recognizes him as the Crown Prince from the game's sequel and her personal favorite character. She remembers seeing his design in her past life and immediately falling for him. Sadly, she never got to play his game because she died before it even dropped. Aquastede tells her to keep her chin up because she hasn't done a single thing wrong. Heart Knights tries to argue, but that only makes the sequel ML even more triggered. He points out that Heart Knight's behavior is 10 times worse than anything Tiara ever did. He straight up roasts him, saying that humiliating a lady like this is a disgrace to any prince. He turns back to Tiara and asks if the engagement is officially dead. The second she says yes, he drops to one knee and proposes, admitting he's wanted her for a long time. Tiara is absolutely stunned by this sudden level up. Seeing her shock, he tells her she doesn't have to answer right away. He kisses her hand, leaving the entire room in total silence. Tiara finally smiles, feeling valued for the first time in a while. But Akari, losing her spot in the spotlight, steps in to kill the vibe. She claims Tiara doesn't deserve a happy ending because of her villainous behavior. She grapples onto Aquasteed's arm, basically demanding that he side with her guild. Tiara urgently warns her not to touch a foreign prince so casually, but Akari has zero chill and ignores the logic check. Aquasteed yeets her hand off his arm and hits Tiara with a wholesome smile for her consideration, before turning his rage mode glare on Akari, declaring she's overstepped her bounds and ordering her to be kicked from the server. The room is stun-locked, as Akari is dragged out of the hall like a basic NPC. Aquasteed refocuses on Tiara, dropping an apology for the drama and promising he'll always be her personal plot armor. Tiara is just staring in disbelief, realizing that with Aquasteed's interference, the game script is officially broken and she has no walkthrough for what happens next. During the carriage ride back, she's replaying the whole event, still processing the massive plot twist. She was supposed to hit the bad ending and get deleted from society just a few frames ago. Yet here comes the prince of the sequel game to rewrite her destiny. She's still reeling from the proposal, wondering how a high-tier MC could actually fall for a villainess like her. She steals a glance at him, and when their eyes lock, he hits her with a smile that's purely god-tier. Embarrassed, she panic-swipes her gaze away and drops an apology. Tiara. Rose admits she's shocked that Aquasteed chose her when his DMs are probably flooded with other noble ladies. Her words give him a massive mood buff, as he gently asks if this means he actually has a shot. She suddenly recovers a memory log showing this isn't actually their first meeting. Turns out they were classmates in a previous semester, even if they never officially partied up. Aquasteed confesses she's always had his interest on lock, recalling how he'd watch her solo grind novels while secretly looting sweets, finding it adorable how her expressions would change with the plot. He even admits that whenever she leaked tears over a sad chapter, he wanted to be her shield. He even admits that whenever he saw her cry, he felt an overwhelming urge to hold her. Tiara tries to hide her blushing face. Aquasteed tells her not to hide and apologizes if he seemed like a stalker. He explains he just couldn't help himself as his feelings for her got deeper and deeper. But since she was engaged to the prince, he never tried to steal her away. He actually left the country to study, hoping that putting some distance between them would help him move on. But when he came back for the ball, that announcement was the shock of a lifetime. Realizing his chance was finally here, he knew he couldn't stay silent anymore. Tiara is actually grateful. She felt totally alone in that moment, and his backup gave her the strength to keep going. Even Aquasteed admits he was surprised by how brutal the prince's punishment was. He kisses a strand of her hair and promises that if she really got banished, he would have just taken her with him. Still blushing, she finds it hard to believe someone actually cares for her this much. He assures her he's dead serious and leans in for a gentle forehead kiss. As he pulls away, he says he wishes their carriage ride could have lasted longer. He helps her out and before he leaves, asks her out on an official date. Tiara is all in, and he promises to pick her up in 3 days. Back at the manor, Shah is absolutely fuming, ready to delete the prince for the way he treated Tiara. Her parents then ask the real question, how is she gonna respond to that proposal? Since the prince is officially history, marrying Aquasteed is actually a valid route now. Tiara looks down, thinking she isn't good enough for him and that a villainess like her shouldn't get a happy ending. The next day, Heart Knights tries to visit Akari, but the guards are actually doing their job for once. He claims he just wants to confirm some things, because his brain is finally starting to process last night's drama. He eventually gets in and is greeted by an overhyped Akari. She starts whining about being bored since she isn't allowed to leave the house. Heart Knights is low-key unsettled by how she doesn't seem to care about the chaos she caused. Akari starts trash-talking Aquasteed's proposal, acting like he's just tricking Tiara. Heart Knights finally asks if Tiara actually did anything wrong. Akari plays the victim, claiming she was bullied but endured it because the prince was there. She goes in for a hug, but Heart Knights hit her with the "get off me" and pushes her away. Confused, Akari thinks Tiara must have poisoned his mind, but he tells her he hasn't even seen her since the party. Akari is triggered that Tiara is still part of the story. In her head, the villainess should have been deleted from the plot after the ball. She changes tactics and asks him to speed up the punishment. But when she brings up Aqua Steed again, the prince starts smelling a rat. Akari insists she's just trying to save him, claiming the sequel ML doesn't know Tiara's true nature. Before things get even more awkward, a guard tells him his visitation time is up. Heart Knights leaves without a word, while Akari is back there begging for him to stay. Once he's outside, the regret starts hitting hard. For the first time, he wonders if he just made the biggest mistake of his life. Elsewhere, Tiara is alone in her room, stressing about what comes next. She doesn't know much about the sequel game, and the unknown is terrifying. She's worried that a new heroine will eventually spawn and steal Aqua Steed away from her. Suddenly, a small stone hits her window and snaps her out of it. She looks out to see Aqua Steed standing there like a total Chad, commenting on the moon like a true romantic. He smoothly leaps onto her balcony and invites her to the Fairy Star Festival, wanting to catch some magical vibes together. Tiara remembers this is a major in-game event where you go with your top-tier love interest. She points out that the festival isn't even supposed to happen this time of year. But Aqua Steed doesn't care about the rules. He uses his op magic to summon the fairies himself. Seeing her shiver, he drapes his coat over her shoulders, acting like the ultimate gentleman. As they watch the glowing lights, Aqua Steed is clearly enjoying every second. He leans in and admits that being with her makes him so happy it's almost scary. Tiara is blushing like crazy, but he tells her to look up at the sky. The sky is absolutely breathtaking, filled with shooting stars and magical energy. Caught up in the magic, Tiara thanks him. He gently brushes her hair and smiles, just glad she's having a good time. And in that moment, she realizes she's officially falling for him. The next day, King Alexander and the prince are having a tense meal. Alexander reveals he knows about the prince's secret visit to Akari and asks if he actually learned anything useful. Heart Knights admits he was a total idiot for believing Akari and that he should have listened to Tiara. Better late than never. The king tells him that Tiara felt the same way. He says she didn't even blame the prince for the mess, which just makes him feel like even more of a loser. She even took some of the blame for not communicating better. Heart Knights is drowning in regret as he remembers the good times. Realizing what he lost, he thinks back to all the times she scolded him while they were growing up. The king explains that she only did that because she truly cared about him and the future of the kingdom. Heart Knights finally gets it. Tiara was his most loyal ally and he just trashed her. He realized too late that he basically spat on the only person who had his back. But the king reminds him that no matter how much he regrets it now, that engagement is officially over. Meanwhile, Tiara is busy getting advice from Fellini on which dress to wear for her big date with the sequel MC. Fellini smiles warmly, noting how happy and excited Tiara Rose looks for her first date. It hits Tiara right then, this isn't just a mission, it's her first real romantic outing in this world. As she sits at the mirror, Fellini equips her with a legendary coral hairpiece from the sequel ML's home kingdom. Talk about a perfect fashion buff to win over the prince. The carriage spawns in right on time. Tiara's heart is doing backflips as she rushes out to meet him. They head to a breathtaking flower field, basically a high-tier dating spot for a quiet picnic. Our MC even brought some homemade baked goods to show off her cooking stats. Aqua takes a bite and gives it the 5-star review, making Tiara beam with pride. She starts geeking out about how much she loves baking. She explains the perfect drink pairings for every sweet, from tea to cocoa, like a true dessert pro. She even admits she once cleared an entire basket of sweets solo while reading a novel. Her maid had to hit her with a lecture for that total glutton move. Aqua just chuckles, finding her little quirks absolutely top tier. He's so into the conversation he could listen to her ramble for the rest of the season. He goes for another round, but this time he offers a sweet directly to Tiara. She's nervous as heck, but she lets the prince feed her like a true heroine. Then he gets bold, sliding an arm around her waist and asking for nickname permissions. They swap names, and then he pulls her into a sudden hug that catches her off guard. As he shares how happy he is, Tiara Rose becomes flustered by her racing heart, but she slowly calms when she hears Aqua Steed's own heartbeat also drumming madly. She pulls back and hides her face in her hands. Aqua teases her, asking if she was waiting for a kiss, but promises he's gonna take things slow for now. To kill the awkwardness, he asks her to feed him this time. She picks a fresh one, and he loves that comforting, home-cooked flavor. She agrees, carefully choosing one he hasn't tried yet. He remarks that her sweets have a gentle, comforting flavor, leaving our MC blushing hard. He notices the hairpiece she's wearing and asks if it means he's actually got a shot with her. Tiara just gives him a warm, sincere smile that says everything. Taking that as her final answer, Aquastide leans in, matching her vibe perfectly. Even though she's still low-key panicking about the glitchy future of her script, she decides to savor this rare moment of peace. Once she fast travels back home, she hits her father with the news that she's officially accepting the proposal. Her dad admits it hits his HP hard to see her leave, but he gives her his blessing because her happiness is the ultimate main quest. Soon enough, Tiara spawns at Aquastide's castle, where she meets his high-level attendant, Elliot. As Elliot escorts her through the base, they chat about kingdom lore, specifically the limited edition accessories each country is known for. Suddenly, Heartknights appears out of nowhere, completely stun-locked the moment he sees her character model. Realizing she's here for the competition, he hits a major guilt debuff and lowers his gaze. He actually drops a deep bow, apologizing for his toxic behavior at the graduation ball. Tiara hits him with a stern look, reminding him that a prince should never let his crown tilt so easily. Heartknights gives a weak smile, noting that Tiara was always the only one who could keep his ego in check. He drops a final GG and thanks her for everything. Seeing him drop the rage mode, Tiara finally feels her stress bar start to empty. She realizes Heartknights finally read the patch notes and isn't actually a villain at his core. But as he steps closer to touch her, Aquastide suddenly lunges in and pulls her into a protective embrace. He fixes the prince with a sharp, cold glare, demanding to know what he thinks he's doing with his fiancée. Now, before Aquastide ever started simping for Tiara, he actually transferred into the academy to finish his training. He'd already spent years speedrunning through the world map to max out his knowledge stats. The second he spawned at the school, he became the ultimate target for every female student's affection. He even humored them a bit, flashing a smile that basically acted like a charm spell. Elliot was out here tracking his stats, noting that his popularity was reaching broken levels. He pointed out that in just a few days, Aquastide had accidentally built a massive fan club that was growing every time he walked by. But the prince just ignored the hype, asking Elliot for the location of the legendary books he needed to loot. Elliot confirmed the library had the goods, so the two of them headed there to grind some study hours. On the way, Elliot asked if he'd found a bride yet, mentioning that the prince had already swiped left on every single marriage invitation. Aquastide basically said he was too busy focusing on his future ruler grind set to care about romance. But once inside the library, he spotted Tiara Rose through the window, completely breaking his focus. Watching her smile made his heart rate redline for reasons he couldn't explain. He recognized her immediately because his observation skills had flagged her before. He remembered the welcome party where Heartknights introduced her as his permanent party member. Even then, he noted her visual design was top tier and her etiquette stats were perfectly refined. She already moved like she had the queen skin equipped and was ready for the throne. Back when she was the other guy's fiancée, Aqua had already noticed how Tiara had refined her etiquette stats to the max. She already carried herself like someone fit to stand beside a future ruler. He'd see her in the halls, always composed and helping out other students like a pro. He felt a connection seeing someone else grinding just as hard to be worthy of the crown. But it was the small, unguarded moments that really captured his attention. The way her face lit up for sweets or a good story was his literal kryptonite. Aqua spent every day in the library just to catch a glimpse of her. His attendant Elliot eventually noticed. He realized Aqua's library visits were no longer for reading, but just to quietly watch Tiara from afar. He called out the prince on his simping, and Aqua didn't even try to deny it. One day when it started raining, Tiara and Fellini prepared to head out. Aqua shocked Elliot by using magic to ensure Tiara Rose's spot remained dry so she could continue enjoying her picnic. Elliot questioned the waste of mana, but Aqua capped and said it was for her book. The real reason, he was already head over heels. He knew the truth, he had completely fallen for her. His magic even made a rainbow appear, giving her a reason to smile, something he'd been wanting to see for a long time. He had to fight the urge to reach out and hold her for days on end. He was in love, but since she was Heartknight's fiancée, he stayed in his lane for her sake. Elliot suggested talking with TR. Rose, but Aqua refused. He has too much class to flirt with another man's fiancée. After that, he just settled on praying for her happiness. But then he walks in and sees the prince simping for Akari right in Tiara's face. Watching our MC collapse that day was his absolute worst nightmare. He was the first one to react immediately. He gathered her in his arms and ordered the others to prep the infirmary. He sat by her bed, wondering why the usually composed Tiara was showing this much weakness. He suspected it was the new girl's influence and her closeness to the prince. He decided right then that if the prince was gonna fumble Tiara, he was going to be the one to come to her rescue. But just as he made up his mind, Heart Knights entered and thanked him for watching over her, reminding Aqua that it was still technically the prince's duty to stay by her side, not his. He had to leave them alone, but he couldn't stop thinking about the fact that he finally got to hold her. That had been the first time he had ever held the girl he loved. He knew tomorrow would mark the end of his time at the academy. But then came the graduation ball, where the prince publicly trashed our MC. Aqua was so furious, his magic almost went into full berserker mode right there in the hall. He calmed himself, paid his respects, and then stepped right between Tiara and the prince. He finally snapped, commanding Heart Knights to stop and deciding to take what he wanted. No more watching from the sidelines. He proposed to her then and there, officially joining the server as her new fiancée. From afar, he proposed to her right in front of everyone. After the party, he sent a magic bird delivery to his dad to make things official. The letter was meant to deliver his message as quickly and safely as possible, informing his father that he would be bringing TR Rose home as his future queen. Elliot was finally relieved to see his prince take action, even if the proposal was super dramatic. Eventually, TR Rose agreed to the upgrade. Fast forward to now, Elliot informs him that TR Rose has actually arrived for a visit. Aqua is hyped she came all this way, but he's still got a mountain of paperwork to clear first. When he finally gets free, he spots the ex-prince talking to Tiara like nothing ever happened. The audacity of this NPC is actually insane, acting like he didn't just trash their engagement. Aqua pulls Tiara close and tells the ex to back off, reminding him that she's officially his fiancée now. Tiara is loving the energy, and the two share a sweet reunion right in front of him. Aqua turns his attention to Heart Knights, who is absolutely glitching over the news. He thought he could still make amends, but he's way too late for this patch. Realizing he nearly crossed the line, Heart Knights bows an apology and Aqua decides to overlook it. Aqua leads Tiara off on a castle tour, leaving the prince to drown in his own regret. As they walk, Aqua promises he'll always be her shield, no explanation needed. Hearing him call her his fiancée makes Tiara's heart officially bloom. He cups her hands and thanks her for saying yes to his sudden proposal. In turn, she thanks him for saving her from that toxic route and actually loving her. They arrive at a high-tier tea party in the Rose Garden, laid out just for them. For Tiara, this feels like she's living her absolute best dream life with Aqua. She starts geeking out over the kingdom's specialties, like the strawberries. But she stops before she reveals too much past life knowledge. Close call. Aqua doesn't care, he just wants her to eat as much as she wants and be happy. After the feast, Elliot formally reintroduces himself as the prince's main support character. He's not a noble, but he's been by Aqua's side since day one. Fellini bows and introduces herself as the loyal maid who's been with Tiara since last year. Tiara adds that they grew up together, and she basically views Fellini as her older sister. Fellini swears she's staying with Tiara for the long haul. Even if she stays in Marin Forest, Fellini is following her to the ends of the earth. The whole squad is vibing, and Tiara is feeling overwhelmed with pure happiness. Meanwhile, Akari is bored out of her mind and stuck in detention like a total loser. She's fuming that the prince hasn't visited and that Tiara is still in the picture. She thinks she deserves the Op Prince just because she's the heroine of this world. She cooks up a shady plan and gives a classic villainess smile. Back at the garden, Aqua leads Tiara to a secluded spot for some one-on-one time. He pulls her close, finally getting that private moment he's been craving. He apologizes for the rushed proposal before and asks her again, properly this time. No more drama, just vibes as he repeats his proposal. This time, Tiara accepts without a single moment of hesitation. Aqua pulls her in tight and finally drops the L word. He's completely in love. Then comes the main event, Tiara's very first kiss. Properly this time. Her heart is soaring as Aqua peppers her face with affection before ending with one on the lips. He hugs her and apologizes for breaking his weight promise, but she's clearly not complaining. Tiara. Rose decides to save her game state right here, realizing she's finally hit peak happiness. She melts into his hug, wishing this cutscene would never end. But the vibes are suddenly obliterated when a brilliant light erupts across the castle grounds. Even Heart Knights can see the flash from his lonely tower, sending guards and attendants into a full-on sprint toward Aquistad and Tiara. Rose to find the source of the anomaly. Aquistad wonders if a high-level mage is trolling them, since he's never seen an effect like this, but Tiara instantly recognizes it as the heroine's op magic, the Holy Prayer. This spell is basically a server-wide cleanse, capable of deleting corruption and ailments that would normally lead to a kingdom's game over. Tiara had almost forgotten this mechanic existed because Akari had never bothered to equip it before. And as the light fades, Elliot leads a scouting party to investigate the blast zone. Meanwhile, Tiara is told to stick close to her prince, and while Fellini tries to buff her confidence, Tiara's mind is clouded by a massive worry debuff. She can't stop thinking about that spell, knowing every king on the map is desperate for the Holy Prayer, which makes Akari the ultimate prize of the story. She's terrified that Aquistad might eventually want that power for himself, which would mean her route gets deleted. But even without her saying a word, Aquistad reassures her, promising to be her permanent shield. Once the light show is over, Aquistad and Tiara. Rose settle in for tea while waiting for the scouts to report back. Tiara. Rose is low-key spiraling about how Aquistad will react to the Holy Prayer lore, fearing that since they've entered the sequel's timeline, Akari is destined to be the main party member after all. A guard finally arrives with a cover story, claiming the light was just a glitch in some magical equipment, making Fellini sigh in relief that the server isn't actually crashing. Aquistad offers to escort Tiara. Rose home himself. Tiara. Rose accepts, but internally she's desperate to stay by his side as the game's original plot starts to warp around them. Later that night, Elliot visits Aquistad's study to drop some forbidden intel, informing him that Akari has officially awakened the Holy Prayer ability. The news hits Aquistad like a truck, since Akari was the last person he expected to have a saint build. Elliot acknowledges that the situation is now high stakes because every nation on the map covets that power. According to the law, that magic is strong enough to bring peace to an entire kingdom, and Aquistad knows that nations would commit any crime to secure it, even forcing arranged marriages to keep the bloodline locked down. Elliot predicts the Lapis Lazuli server will pressure Heart Knights to marry Akari for the stat boost, but Aquistad admits he also wants that power for Marin Forest, which means he's going to need Akari. 10 days pass, and Tiara's unease hasn't been nerfed one bit. There's a total media blackout regarding the Holy Prayer incident, and while Tiara knows her dad has the tea, she doesn't want to trigger any stressful dialogue. What's worse is that Aquistad has been totally MIA since the light show, making her fear that he's already been rizzed by the Holy Prayer news and has changed his endgame plans. Fellini approaches her, saying they can leave for Marin Forest whenever she's ready, vowing to stay in Tiara's party no matter which kingdom they fast travel to. Meanwhile, Akari is still under house arrest and bored out of her mind, waiting for her knight in shining armor to rescue her. She thought revealing her cheat codes would bring Aquistad running, but she's been waiting 2 weeks with no ping. Suddenly, there's a knock at her door, and by the next day, Tiara. Rose is busy crafting sweets for Aquistad's long-awaited visit. She delicately decorates her pie, trying to tell herself the script is still intact since her dad hasn't mentioned any bad omens. She's hoping the tarts and pies will be enough to buff their relationship, and when he finally spawns, he immediately apologizes for the scheduling lag. They sit for tea, and Aquistad drops the news that the engagement preparations are finally hard-coded. But when he mentions Akari's name, Tiara's heart literally stops. She's terrified history is repeating its toxic loop, and that Akari is about to steal her man again. Until Aquistad clarifies that Akari is now formally engaged to Heart Knights, Tiara bursts into tears, confessing she was terrified she was getting replaced by the saint. But Aquistad looks shocked, reassuring her that Tiara is the only one in his heart. He leans in to wipe away the tears with a tender kiss on the lips, promising that he's taking her back to Marin Forest to be his queen. He seals the deal with another deep kiss, and all of Tiara's worries are officially deleted, at least until later that night, when a brilliant light fills her bedroom. She jolts awake and sees Akari has materialized right in front of her. Akari calmly asks if Tiara used to be a player of the game, leaving Tiara stunned as she realizes Akari is also a reincarnated gamer. In this moment, it's confirmed Akari is another Ice Guide player from the real world. Akari explains she caught on because Tiara was the only one whose AI behavior didn't match the original script, and she blames Tiara Rose for griefing her perfect ending. Tiara Rose tries to feign ignorance, but Akari easily sees through her low-tier bluff. Akari admits she originally just wanted the happy ending with Heart Knights, but when Aquasteed showed up with those sequel-level graphics, she decided she wanted the top-tier prince instead. She roasts Tiara Rose for knowing zero lore about the sequel or its adorable new heroine, so Tiara finally drops the act and admits she was reincarnated too. She explains she only cleared the first game before her life ended, making Akari realize Tiara is basically playing without a guide for the sequel content. Akari starts info-dumping about the sequel being the greatest thing ever, explaining that the new heroine is a duke's daughter named Isilla and gushing about her romance quest with Aquasteed. Then Akari reminds Tiara that she's currently dual-wielding the Holy Prayer power, declaring that Aquasteed only wants her for that massive stat boost. She coldly demands that Tiara delete her engagement with him, but Tiara hits her with an immediate no. Akari's expression twists as she goes into rage mode, insisting she deserves Aquasteed because she's a completionist who played the game more times. Tiara fires back that Aquasteed isn't just a collection of pixels anymore, which earns her a wicked grin from Akari. The fake heroine raises her hand and activates a magic proc, inflicting a tiny cut on Tiara's cheek. With a chilling tone, Akari says she's visualizing a scenario where Tiara gets injured and is forced to quit the party. Tiara instinctively tries to kite away in fear, but Akari tells her to calm down, claiming she's just going to put her in a sleep status until she wins the game. Akari unleashes a massive thunder spell, but before it can land, a bright barrier surrounds Tiara, obliterating the attack. Suddenly, familiar arms wrap around Tiara from behind. As Aquasteed holds her tight, his voice full of relief that he arrived before the team wipe. Akari is stun-locked as Aquasteed notices the cut on Tiara's face, his aura turning dark with guilt. He apologizes for being a second late with the save, just as Tiara's dad bursts in to see what the hell is going on. Aquasteed demands an explanation from Akari, who desperately tries to spin the narrative in her favor. She claims she's being forced into a marriage quest with Heart Knights and begs Aquasteed to let her join his guild instead. She pleads with him to take her to Marin Forest, but her dad is fuming, accusing Akari of being a constant source of grief. Akari doubles down, insisting Aquasteed needs her saint powers to buff his kingdom. Tiara clings to him, her heart filled with uncertainty, but Aquasteed admits while her magic is high tier, his kingdom can thrive without her toxic presence. Tiara clings to her man, her heart aching with all this uncertainty. Aqua admits the Holy Prayer is a buff, but his kingdom can prosper just fine without Akari's power. He gently scoops our MC up into his arms like a literal boss. In a clear voice, he states that Tiara is the only woman he wants as his queen. Akari collapses, unable to accept that she just took the ultimate L. Moments later, guards arrive and slap on the magical handcuffs before dragging her away. Even after she's safe, Aqua keeps carrying her, telling her it's okay to rely on him more from now on. Tiara snuggles closer into his chest, softly thanking him for being her hero. The next day, Akari is relocated to a remote manor far from the main plot. Her new room is a total magic null zone, making it impossible for her to escape. For a second, she wishes a prince would come and save her like in the games, but she bitterly realizes that even though this is a game, nothing is going her way. Suddenly, there's a knock and Heart Knights enters the room. She tries to play it cool with a cheerful smile, begging him to stay for tea. He's clearly hesitant, but he eventually sits down across from her. Heart Knight speaks first, informing her that the two of them will be getting married. She says yes immediately, not even hesitating for a second. The prince is actually caught off guard by this. He assumed she was still simping for Aquasteed after that public rejection. In reality, Akari is greedily trying to collect both of them. If the game allowed it, she'd definitely take the harem route. But since she's cornered, she just caps and tells him he's the only one she loves. That's all the prince needed to hear to soothe his ego. They finish their tea, and he leaves her to plot her next move in peace. Meanwhile, our MC is finally ready to leave her home kingdom for good. Tiara and Aqua bid her parents a formal goodbye, promising to keep their relationship at 100. The carriage is prepped and ready, but Tiara lingers for one last moment. It's a tough goodbye for our villainess. She reassures her parents she'll visit soon after her bridal training is complete. She shares one final hug with her mom before heading off to start her new life. Her father officially assigns Fellini to her permanent party, a role the maid accepts without a single frame of lag. Tiara takes Aquistide's hand and hops into the carriage, which is the start of a long trek because she immediately starts asking about the local law, wondering if fairies actually spawn in his kingdom. Aquistide hits her with a confident smile, assuring her that the fairies will definitely drop a blessing on her, making Tiara feel hyped enough to try buffing her confidence, so she leans in to act a little more demanding. But her nerves hit a critical fail before she can even land the move. Aquistide thinks her social awkwardness is endearing, but suddenly a magical letter jump scares them by materializing out of thin air. He realizes it's a DM from Akari and intercepts the loot first to check for any toxic traps. It turns out Akari is officially quitting the Aquistide race and has resolved to find happiness with Heart Knights, so he passes the message to Tiara, and it's lucky he did because she spots some hidden Japanese characters at the bottom. The note warns that the sequel's true heroine is about to spawn into the server, and Akari will be absolutely furious if Tiara loses her spot in the guild to this new girl. Tiara asks to keep the letter, vowing to use it as a motivation buff whenever she feels like her plot armor is thinning out. She's determined not to get gapped by a heroine she hasn't even met yet, completely unaware that two mysterious figures are spectating their carriage from the skybox, tracking their every move toward Marin Forest. Mid-journey, Tiara goes totally silent, which prompts Aquistide to run a wellness check, asking if she's suffering from a homesick debuff or something similar. She admits she'll miss her home server during bridal training, but having him in her party makes her feel totally at peace. Aquistide smiles with pure sincerity, and as he grabs her hand, he promises to give her any loot she wants, though he teases that he might block her return home fast travel option. They finally reach the border where the graphics change completely. Elegant roses decorate the lapis lazuli side, while Marin Forest is covered in shimmering bubbles. Tiara is in total awe of the map design, especially when Aquistide points toward the coastline, revealing the vast ocean for the first time, which completely takes her breath away. The endless blue view fills her with excitement for her new life, so they decide to take a detour, stopping by the beach so Tiara can check out the water biome up close. As she nears the shore, several sea fairies suddenly leap from the waves, but they only greet the guys, hitting Aquistide and Elliot with high-energy dialogue because they've clearly played together before. Tiara watches with major envy, and when she voices her wish to join their guild, Fellini encourages her to just walk up and initiate a conversation. Our MC gathers her courage and drops a polite greeting, but she gets completely ratioed because the sea fairies respond with cold, dismissive NPC energy. Aquistide explains that these fairies are notoriously fickle and hard to rizz up, which is weird because the second they notice Fellini, they swarm her with a massive affection buff, screaming that they love her. The maid tries to redirect the hype to Tiara, but it's no use because the fairies have already picked their favorite party member. Tiara fakes a "I'm fine" status, but she's secretly taking emotional damage from the rejection. Aquistide reassures her she has time to grind their friendship, and he even jokes that he's glad they didn't take an immediate liking to her, otherwise they might try to steal her from his party. Suddenly, a girl named Ashira emerges from the water, making Tiara's heart sink, as she realizes this is the sequel's heroine Akari warned her about. Ashira and Aquistide exchange casual dialogue like they're already in a high-affinity guild, before the prince introduces Tiara as his official fiancée. It turns out Ashira is from the ducal family that manages the ocean, which is why she often assists him with all his administrative daily quests and royal duties. Tiara can't shake the unease, wondering if she's doomed to be the villainess again, now that the sequel's plot is officially starting to overwrite her life. Feeling overwhelmed, she excuses herself to the carriage but stops to take a break under a nearby tree to try and clear her mind of all these negative thoughts. Suddenly, she hears gentle voices and the forest fairies appear before her. Unlike the sea types, these fairies instantly love her, which is massive because Elliot points out that forest fairies are the most distrustful NPCs toward humans in the entire game. He admits he was basically stalking her to act as a bodyguard, and as he watches, the fairies force-feed Tiara a blessed flower to buff her mood and make her smile again. She heads back to the shore where Aquistide hits her with a light scolding, begging her to stay in his line of sight, so he doesn't have a panic attack. Fellini offers a snack, but Tiara declines, resolving to focus on her allies, instead of fearing the upcoming harem drama that she knows is scripted. They finally reach the castle and hit the holding room, where Aquistide drops some hype news about a welcome party in 3 days and a legendary dress he's already looted for her. Tiara is delighted, making Aquistide go full affectionate mode, as he peppers her face with kisses, complaining that waiting a year to marry her is a major endurance test. Tiara tells him to stay calm, explaining that her bridal training is a necessary grind, so she can be a high-tier partner worthy of standing beside the future king. They share a kiss, locking in their promise, until the day of the party finally arrives, and Fellini starts prepping Tiara's hair for her big debut. They need a statement hairpiece, so some maids bring in a variety of roses, but Tiara asks for a deep blue rose to match Aquistide's character design hair color. The maids say blue roses don't bloom now, but then the forest fairies activate a magic spell, instantly turning the flowers blue and proving Tiara has the Blessed by Fairies title. She might be the only human in this era to have that perk, so she walks into the ballroom, where everyone is watching the prince's chosen fiancée for the first time. The music stops, leading to massive applause, as Aquistide tells her the blue roses make her look like she belongs to him. She smiles and says she already does, before they path over to the king and queen, properly introducing herself to get that official royal blessing. The royals are thrilled with her etiquette, but then Ashira spawns back into the scene, congratulating the couple and inviting Tiara to raid her mansion sometime. Aquistide hypes up the ocean view at her base, so Tiara accepts the invite, even if she's still low-key hesitant about getting too close to the heroine. A few days later, she fast travels to Ashira's estate, and she's instantly impressed by the rare fish swimming in a fountain filled with actual seawater. Ashira looks like she's living her best life, which makes Tiara wonder if she even stands a chance against a girl with such a high-tier magical background. Ashira mentions she's happy the prince found love, and Tiara is puzzled, thinking the duke's daughter would have been in love with him herself. Ashira denies having any romance stats for him, claiming she's satisfied just being with the sea, which sounds sincere, but Tiara keeps up her observation haki just in case. They head into the ocean inside a magical air bubble, and Tiara is astonished to see the fish acting like they're on her friends list already. Ashira moves through the water like an absolute sea goddess, and Tiara realized Aqua's parents are totally on board, hyped that their son picked such a polite and high-tier lady to stand by his side. Back at the party, Ashira spawns in to congratulate them on the engagement. She offers to be Tiara's first friend in the kingdom and invites her to her manor for a vibe check. Tiara's surprised by the kindness, but Aqua explains that her seaside estate is a legendary spot and Tiara would love it. Since she doesn't sense any toxic energy, Tiara agrees to the visit. The two girls hold hands, but Tiara's low-key nervous about getting too close to the sequel's heroine. A few days later, TR Rose travels toward Ashira's manor. Her new support NPC, Tamo, makes sure she's comfortable throughout the ride. They reach the gates where Ashira is waiting to give them the grand garden tour. Tiara's shocked to see some weird, exotic fish swimming in the garden fountain. Ashira explains these are rare creatures, and the fountain is actually filled with salt water. Tiara realizes that Ashira is the definition of a sequel heroine, rich, powerful, and absolutely stunning. They head to the shore for tea, and the view of the ocean is a literal masterpiece. Ashira invites her for a dip, explaining her magic allows them to breathe underwater and keep their clothes dry. Tiara is floored by this power, a reminder of how blessed sequel heroines really are. She starts to worry if she even stands a chance since she's playing with zero magic stats. Ashira mentions she heard they met at school and is happy they're marrying for love instead of some forced quest. This confuses Tiara because she assumed Ashira would be fighting her for Aqua's heart. To test the waters, she asks about Ashira's love life, but the girl says she's perfectly happy just living by the sea. Tiara presses harder, asking if she's ever actually been in love. Ashira gives a calm no, claiming she's never caught feelings for anyone. Tiara wonders if she's capping, but she seems way too sincere to be lying. So when Ashira invites her into the deep blue, Tiara is finally all in. Ashira casts a legendary blessing, surrounding them in a shimmering bubble that looks amazing. They sink beneath the waves and Tiara is stunned that the fish aren't even scared of them. Ashira explains the fish are basically her besties and they're hyped to meet the new princess. Watching Ashira glide through the water, Tiara feels like she's standing next to a literal sea goddess. They spot some coral and start geeking out over the kingdom's famous jewelry, until Ashira decides to fast travel back to the surface to prep a tea party buff, leaving Tiara to enjoy the ocean scenery, which turns out to be a massive mistake because when our MC finally resurfaces, she spots Aquasteed and Ashira in a deep dialogue sequence, and just as the prince leans in looking like he's about to lock in a kiss animation, Tiara panic dives back down to dodge the heartbreak damage, terrified that the game's original plot is finally trying to overwrite her happy ending. But she decides to stop playing like a background NPC and resolve to fight for her MC, charging back to the surface and grappling Aquasteed's hand, pleading with him not to leave her out of his party ever again. Aquasteed finds this sudden possessive stat boost absolutely adorable, pulling her into a firm embrace, while Ashira just spectates the whole fan service moment with a blushing face. Cut to another day where Tiara is touring the castle and catches the duo in the garden again. But her attendant Tamo reassures her that they're just grinding out some official paperwork, which is a total relief until she encounters the forest fairies, who lead her through a magical door toward a high-level forest castle, where she's suddenly face-to-face with Keith, the forest fairy king himself. Tamo notices her stress and reassures her they're just discussing official kingdom business. Tiara is still suspicious since they're on the terrace instead of the office, but seeing the paperwork in her arms helps her relax. Tamo leads her to the garden, where a swarm of forest fairies immediately spawns around her. She offers them cookies and is delighted to watch them nibble on her home-baked loot. The fairies then lead her to a glowing rose that transforms into a hidden portal. They tell her the forest fairy king is waiting for her on the other side. She steps through and finds herself in a forest castle, coming face to face with Keith, the fairy king himself. Realizing who he is, Tiara gives a respectful bow and they exchange some polite greetings. Keith studies her for a second before telling her that her soul is a total anomaly. He says it's unstable, but carries a sweet fragrance that he's never smelled before. The king starts closing the distance, making our MC super nervous. She awkwardly suggests the smell is just the cookies she's carrying around. Keith tells her to drop the formal titles and just use his name, talk about a major ego. Tiara low-key thinks he's a bit full of himself. He tries a cookie and instantly notices it's infused with traces of Tiara's magic. He loves the flavor. When she calls him king, he immediately corrects her it's Keith or nothing. He explains that fairies are all about that casual, name-only lifestyle. Tiara admits she's jealous and wishes she could live as freely as a forest sprite. Keith senses that something is heavy on her heart right now. She vents about how humans are weighed down by duties, unlike the carefree fairies. Seeing her struggle, Keith pats her head and tells her to come to him whenever she's feeling burnt out. Meanwhile, back in the human realm, Shira and Aqua are wrapping up their meeting. They exchange some polite words, thanking each other for the continued teamwork. Elliot notes that it's weird Ashira is visiting so often, and even weirder that she's helping with Aqua's personal projects. Turns out Aqua is designing a custom hairpiece for Tiara and needs Ashira's pro-crafting skills. Ashira admits she's a little jealous of Tiara for having such a devoted man. But before they can finish, Tamo rushes in with a serious look on his face. Back in the fairy realm, Keith is curious about Aquasteed and asks Tiara to describe him. What's he like? She describes him as a kind and steady man who has the full support of his kingdom. But she realizes she's been gone too long and panics, asking for the exit portal. Keith just smirks, pulls her close, and in an instant, they teleport directly into Tiara's bedroom. Talk about a shortcut. Aquasteed bursts in right then, frantically searching for her. He pulls his sword on Keith immediately, not realizing he's facing a literal king. Keith teases that he might have been a better match for her, making Tiara scold him for making things complicated. Once Aqua realizes he's the fairy king, he drops to one knee to apologize for the aggro, but he still pulls Tiara close, making it clear she's his fiancée and Keith needs to back off. Keith thinks the jealousy is hilarious and teases Tiara about her overprotective man. He kisses her hand before vanishing, telling her he's only a call away if things get difficult. Aqua immediately scoops her up and carries her toward the carriage. He says Tamo told him the fairies had straight up abducted her. Tiara tries to apologize, but Aqua says he isn't mad at her. He admits he's just jealous because she's so casual with Keith, but always calls him by his formal title. Tiara realizes he's right. She used Keith's name without even thinking. She wonders if Aqua wants her to drop the Prince Act 2. She gives it a try, saying his name softly. The second he hears his name from her lips, all that frustration just melts away. The next day, Tiara is crushing her lessons and getting top-tier praise from her teacher. When Aqua walks in, the instructor hypes up how hard Tiara's been grinding in bridal training. He gives her a warm compliment and asks if they can hang out for a bit. He tells her he wants her to shadow him while he works later today. Tiara hesitates, knowing it's not common for a fiancé to sit in on official business. But Aqua reassures her he wants her to see the weight of the crown firsthand. He wants her to understand the responsibilities they'll both be carrying. Since it'll help her in the future, Tiara decides to follow his lead. Later that night, Tiara is still hitting the books and pulling an all-nighter. Fellini brings her tea and worries she's overworking her brain. But Tiara says this is necessary to become a queen worthy of standing next to Aqua Steed. She thinks back to what she saw in the office earlier. Ashira was there again. She realizes how often the heroine visits the castle, even if it's mostly for work. The next day, Tiara decides to whip up some special sweets for her man. The fairies sense the kitchen vibes and fly in to drop off some legendary forest ingredients. They bring nuts, berries, and flowers, insisting she uses the fairy buffs in her baking. Tiara. Rose feeds a petal to Fellini, who's shocked by how sweet and light it tastes. She explains that these forest gifts are actually edible. Inspired, she bakes a cake decorated with the magical berries and blossoms. Aqua is touched and suggests they take a break to enjoy the legendary loot. Slices are served up to both Aqua and Ashira. After one bite, they're both giving her maximum compliments on the flavor. Even Elliot and Fellini are loving it at their own table. But then, another cake is wheeled into the room. This one is a total boss, stacked with rich cream and fresh strawberries. Ashira explains it's a gift from her family's master chef. Since Tiara's been in the office more, she wanted to share a pro recipe with the squad. She didn't know Tiara was bringing her own home-baked goods today. Tiara handles it like a pro, saying having 2 cakes is actually the opposite of a problem. She dives in, enjoying that fluffy, high-tier sweetness. Aqua watches her fondly, thinking he could stay in this moment forever. Elliot comments on the rich flavor and asks Aqua which cake he actually prefers. Aqua takes a second to think about his answer, but before he can speak, Keith spawns in, eating a slice and claiming Tiara's is obviously the winner. No contest. Aqua is startled, and his jealousy spikes when he sees Keith pat Tiara on the head. Again, he reminds the Fairy King that he's not allowed to touch the goods. Keith just ignores him and vanishes back to his realm. Later that night, Aqua is having another slice of Tiara's cake. Secretly, Elliot calls him out, since the prince usually doesn't even care about sweets. Aqua admits he only likes her baking. Elliot tells him he should have just said that and saved everyone the trouble. But Aqua says he has to be careful with Ashira's feelings too. Elliot remembers that the sea's temper is literally tied to Ashira's mood. Would you like me to continue with the next set of segments? If her mood turns sour, the sea grows restless, but as long as she's chilling, the ocean continues to bless the kingdom with its top-tier bounty. Aqua finishes his dessert and immediately asks for seconds. Meanwhile, our MC Tiara wakes up with some meta-knowledge, remembering a leaked PV from her past life. It was a teaser for the sequel game showing a high-def scene of Aqua drenched after falling into the ocean. She recalls thinking he looked total husbando material, but quickly catches herself. That fanservice moment was supposed to belong to Ashira in the original plot. She's not about to let those two share a wet shirt event in this reality. Right on cue, our op prince mentions he's heading to the shore with Ashira for an inspection. Tiara's mood takes a massive hit, and she's definitely not masking it well. Aqua notices the debuff immediately. He steps closer and hits her with the Speak Your Truth move, silencing her with a finger to her lips until she comes clean. Finally caving, she asks him not to go into the ocean alone with the other girl. To her surprise, he agrees without a second thought. He decides to let Elliot handle the NPC duties because her feelings are his top priority. Relieved, she beams at how much he values her and goes in for a hug. A little later, they break the news of the plan change to Ashira. Since Elliot is still grinding with the knights, they head out to pick him up before the mission starts. Aqua invites Tiara along, promising a visit to a legendary rose garden nearby. The second they enter, both girls are instantly obsessed with the floral loot. Aqua tells them to grab whatever roses they want for their inventory. Ashira gets hyped when she spots some rare white roses blooming way up high. Reaching up to loot them for Tiara Rose, but she whiffs her footing and begins to fall backward. Without a frame of hesitation, Aquasteed grabs her to block the fall into the fountain, but he loses his own balance and ends up soaking wet in the water instead. As he sits there drenched while both girls stare in shock, Tiara feels her heart rate drop to 0. Realizing this scene perfectly mirrors the promotional video from the sequel game she once played. Overcome with anxiety that her route is being overwritten, she turns and runs, reaching her room just as the tears begin to leak from her eyes. She tilts her face up to dry the evidence, but suddenly a hand covers her eyes. Startled, she spins around to find Keith standing right behind her. With a teasing smirk, the Fairy King asks if Aquasteed made her cry, prompting a sharp denial from Tiara that doesn't fool him for a second. Keith knows she's hiding the truth, so he pulls her into his arms. But Keith knows she's lying about being fine. He doesn't even ask, he just teleports them both straight back to the fairy realm. He spawns a soft bed and forces her down, calling her out for having a critically low sleep bar. The forest fairies swarm her immediately, providing the ultimate blanket buff. Tiara. Rose tries to argue she can sleep in her own room like a normal person, but Keith drops a sleep spell and she's out like a light almost instantly. Keith's low-key confused by how fast the spell worked on her. He watches her sleep, wondering why the forest spirits are simping so hard for this girl. At the same time, he knows the sea fairies act the exact same way with Ashira. He remembers a Dark Law moment from centuries ago when Ashira hit a mental breaking point. Back then, the sea fairies turned the entire ocean red and let the coral reefs rot. Meanwhile, the castle is on maximum alert because our MC is nowhere to be found. Aqua and Elliot rush to the dungeon to search the ancient royal library. Aqua goes solo, scanning scrolls for a secret entrance to